And then with the dollars that we received, we've actually created jobs for 5,000 people in terms of doing cleanup work at the Hanford site in terms of direct workers or subcontractors that provide supplies or services to the prime contractors. These are just some of the folks that were newly hired. It's changed the life of a lot of folks. I was talking to one of the people that got newly hired on the groundwater project, and he was actually from Kansas City and drove across the country and spent his last money on gas and actually got hired by CH2M Hill to do groundwater work, and it changed his life for a positive way. He didn't have a job for over a year, and a good job with good benefits, and brought his family out here, and now he's a member of the community. So just an example of how the Recovery Act has changed a lot of people's lives for the positive, not just out of state, but here locally. What are we doing with the money? So that's a key component, obviously. We want to spend the dollars wisely, get cleanup done, reduce the risk Hanford poses to the environment, and reduce overall time or schedule or cost for cleanup. So one of the projects that the contractors are doing is demolishing old facilities on the Hanford site. This is a picture of demolishing activities on the uranium oxide conversion facility next to U Canyon. This is the cool part in terms of demolishing the facility, but the real work goes internal to the facility to get the building ready for demolishing. So the workers spend a lot of time, probably 80% of the effort or so, to, for example, strip out asbestos insulation so that doesn't go airborne during demolishing activities, draining liquids from equipment so that doesn't spill when you demolish the facility. And so it ends up, this took about over a year to get this facility ready to demolish, and then demolishing activities started about 2 months ago, and it's almost done. Another thing that we're doing with Recovery Act dollars is building new treatment capacity for contaminated groundwater. So we have 2 large groundwater systems being installed, one along the Columbia River to remove chromium contamination from groundwater that was contaminated from past operations, and then another very large facility on the center portion of the Hanford site that will clean up groundwater that's been contaminated with carbon tetrachloride and some radionuclides like technetium-99. So the Recovery Act dollars was able to accelerate the construction of those facilities. Those facilities are on schedule to start complete construction by the summer of 2011, and then start operation shortly after that. And you can see some of the photos here of the construction activities that are going on right now. Another thing, in order to feed the treatment facilities, we have to drill groundwater wells, and so part of the Recovery Act project is to drill almost 300 wells along the Columbia River and in the center portion of the Hanford site, and those are well ahead of schedule, as you can see here, in terms of almost being done. Those systems that we're putting in place will quadruple our treatment capacity. Right now we treat about 50 million gallons of water a month, so every day we're doing cleanup out there in terms of treatment of groundwater. And with these systems coming online in the next year or so, that'll go up to 200 million gallons a month and greatly speed up the 2 major goals we have is to stop some chromium contamination from entering the river, the Columbia River, by 2012, and then clean up the groundwater that's contaminated along the river by 2020. So with these systems that are going on in place, we'll definitely be able to realize those goals and restore the groundwater at the Hanford site much sooner than we would be able to if we didn't get Recovery Act dollars. Another thing that we're doing with a high-risk facility called the plutonium finishing plant. So this facility was the key facility at the Hanford site that converted that made the product of Hanford in terms of plutonium metal for the weapons program. And this facility has been shut down for over 10 years, and we're in the middle of using Recovery Act funds to ready that facility for demolishing in 2013. So this is the very high hazard work that the workers are potentially exposed to plutonium. We use lots of safety measures to prevent any sort of intake of plutonium. You can see some of the protective gear worn by the workers to prevent inhalation or injection of plutonium through a cut. And what we're doing with Recovery Act funds is taking out all the process equipment that's highly contaminated with plutonium and packaging that material for disposal on site if it turns out to be low-level waste, or off-site at the WIP isolation pilot plant if it turns out to be transuranic waste. So we're on track, or the contractor's on track to complete that strip out of that large facility by the end of 2012 using stimulus dollars, and then demolish the facility by 2013. Another thing we're doing is retrieving of waste that has been stored since the 1970s awaiting disposal at the National Repository called the WIP Isolation Pilot Plant. Recovery Act dollars allowed us to continue that retrieval of waste and get it in a form that's ready to go to the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. And then also we're using stimulus dollars to move the waste to Carlsbad, New Mexico, where the repository is. We started shipments in March of this year, and we continue those shipments about 5 a week. We do shipments on an average. Another thing that we focused on was expanding both the footprint and the capability of the environmental restoration disposal facility. This facility is the engineered disposal cell in the center portion of the Hanford site that takes all the remediation waste, mostly from the cleanup along the Columbia River, and isolates it from the environment to ensure it doesn't affect the environment in the future. So this is the cornerstone, or a cornerstone, of cleanup of the Hanford site where all of our waste goes. The contractor's been successful in terms of using Recovery Act to expand the capability of the facility by adding 2 new cells called 9 and 10. So large subcontracts were issued to excavate those, that disposal facility, construct it per the regulatory requirements for safe disposal. And then also another key aspect is, with all this cleanup going on in these next couple years, we had to increase the rate at which the facility can receive waste from all the cleanup projects going on. And they, again, were successful in doing that. And if you look at the average number of trucks that went to the environmental restoration disposal facility just in 2009 was around 150. And now they average about 400 trucks a day, that's a day, with a record being 600. So that's just thousands of tons of contaminated debris and soil every day being disposed of at this facility, and removing that contamination away from the river and protecting groundwater and the Columbia River from future contamination. Another thing that happened just last week was another demolishing activity. This had to do with the K East production reactor next to the Columbia River. You might have seen some of the news information on the large stack that went down over last Friday. You could go onto the website and actually see the video. This is, again, one of the things that takes only about less than 30 seconds for it to fall, but took about 4 months in order to prepare the stack for demolishing. So the structural engineering analysis that was done, where to place the explosives, making sure there's no contamination inside the stack that could spread after or during taking the stack down. So a lot of preparation happens before you get the big event in terms of making the stack go down.